Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Ranking Member Lucas for pulling this together, and thanks to the witnesses. This is an absolutely critical discussion, and what we saw in Texas last month was a tragedy. It was heartbreaking, and in my opinion, was something that we, as Americans, should have been able to prevent. I represent a district in Southern California that these types of scenarios are not foreign to us, unfortunately. It's not necessarily the extreme cold, but in our case, it's the extreme heat and it's the winds that have led to, in my district, close to 30 power outages in the last, call it 10 months. We don't live in Venezuela. We live in the United States of America, yet our utilities behave and the public utility companies responsible for power generation in our state behave as if it is Venezuela. These problems are a product of challenges provided by Mother Nature, but it is mankind and the folks responsible for our utility companies and those who represent us in government who are responsible for the failure. We have failed to overcome the challenges that Mother Nature has provided. And I resonate with the comments by my colleague, Mr. Caston, that this is a repeated lesson learned over the last several decades. In my district, we lose power when the winds get above 30 miles per hour. That's not a scenario that one would call a force majeure. That's not an anomaly, especially not in Southern California. That happens on a very frequent basis. We've lost lives. We've risked thousands of lives. We've been surrounded by flames while we have no power. And we've been effectively not only losing our power, but also our water because many of my constituents are on wells that are electrically driven. So my question to the panel, and I think we can start with Mr. Torres, is how do we ensure that we're not playing whack-a-mole here across all 50 states and our territories? How do we ensure that what we saw in Texas doesn't happen in other states, maybe not for the same reasons, maybe for different reasons, and that these lessons learned that you are collecting as a result of the incidents in February in Texas are being disseminated? And it may not be for cold weather, but this grid hardening and the lessons learned, what venues, what media forum, summits, and or discussions are you having to make sure that the lessons learned from Texas, California, and other states are being applied to the rest of the United States so that we're not playing whack-a-mole here indefinitely?
All right, thank you, Mr. Garcia. I can't speak to all of the things that are going on. I can talk to some of the things that we've been doing within NREL and the Department of Energy through the GMI activities and Grid Modernization Lab Consortium. Those are strong collaborations across the industry with the utilities, with the vendors, the various stakeholders. And I fully agree with you that we really have a patchwork of perspectives and policies across the different elements of the grid. And there needs to be more communication discussion as to what are the roles, responsibilities, and the implications of those differences, because we're all trying to achieve a common good here. We all want our lights to stay on. We want to avoid major events like this. And so we need to understand what should each part be for every member. What can we be doing? And what are the changes that that the different participants are implying? How could that affect the overall resilience of the grid? And can there be opportunities for shared costs, shared investments? Those kinds of discussions, I fully agree, need to continue so that we can avoid and mitigate some of these kinds of disasters.
Thank you, sir. And I would just submit to this body and all of us at the federal level that our investments in research into the grid hardening and expansion efforts should include not only the conduits of power between cities and generation plants, but also conduits between entities and bureaucrats who are responsible for making sure lessons learned are proliferated as well. I personally believe that we need to hold the public utility companies accountable for this. This is negligence. This is loss of life. This was foreseeable in many cases. And we as Americans deserve better than this. I thank, again, the chairwoman for opening the aperture on this a little bit further. And I just want to reinforce to my colleagues that this is not a problem unique to Texas. We will lose more Americans in other states as we start seeing some of these incidents expand across the nation. I yield back.
Mr. Foster is next.
Well, thank you. And first,